Hello everybody, welcome back to Language, Litigation, and Integration. Today is January 19th, 2026. So you know how we do it on this one. This will be kind of a casual conversation episode with an emphasis on the recent moves by Donald Trump and the United States government, talking about different world events, current events, but mainly the U.S.'s actions recently. And so, different talking points. Again, my name is Brad. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the United States Constitution gives you a right to your writings and your discoveries, but the law is a joke. It's demonstrably a joke. It's historically a joke. Any attempt at recording history illegally will be prosecuted with absolutely no restraint. And so, I'm deprived of my constitutional rights. It has destroyed my entire life personally. In addition to that, if you're happening to watch this video on YouTube, if you've been exposed to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, any part of academia, they've been profoundly lying for at least the past decade, to the point where it's fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy at the highest level. So congratulations, if you went to university, you're the victim of crime too. That's fun stuff. But anyway, my mathematical and scientific discoveries affect absolutely, literally everybody. But regardless, mainly current events today, talking specifically again, Donald Trump's actions in relation to Greenland and foreign relations, diplomacy, and then just a couple odds and ends talking points. But mainly the current government in the United States. So last episode we had, again, Iran was having protests against their regimes, their Khamenei, they have a supreme leader, Khamenei, and the president Pezeshkian. The point being, the United States comes out and says, hey, if you do anything more egregious with these protests or, kill a bunch of people, which they've done, there's going to be some retribution. And so I saw some chatter on the comms that is being Reddit, that the different air spaces in the region of Iran, Iraq, or, maybe getting cleared out or anticipating a military strike by the United States. So I had that written down, a couple days ago. Nothing seemed to have happened from that, but it definitely seemed to be some tension or some sort of, because Trump had come out and said, we will respond forcefully, because the United States is playing the global peacekeeper, but in no way, in shape or form at all is it actual peace. It's just doing whatever suits, I wouldn't even say America's interest, just this overall sentiment of the Republican Party in general. And again, if you're watching this, I have no political background, I have no religious background. I'm just calling it as I see it, and I'm actively seeking asylum outside of the United States simply because my constitutional rights have been violated so profoundly that I can't have a career and a family. Besides that, I really have no ideological motivation, agenda, period. But the current head of state, Donald Trump, is in no way, shape, or form behaving in a way that is acceptable for a world leader, a head of a nation state, in any way, shape, or form. But nothing came to fruition, or there was no bombings, at least that I saw explicitly reported on, coming out of Iran in relation to their recent protests. And so, we had the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, present her Nobel Prize to Trump. So this is another, again, Idiocracy piled in 1984 on top of, Beavis and Butthead. And so the United States has recently taken a head of state. We covered that in the sovereignty episode, which again, 100% an act of war. 100% it's just like, hey, the U.S. has a bigger economy and a bigger military. What are you going to do? Oh, we're supporting democracy. Oh, the ex-Honduran president, we're just going to let that slide. So again, profound and demonstrable hypocrisy at the global stage. But now, again, Trump wants this peace prize. Then again, Nobel Committee is completely fraudulent. And then there's some sort of legal demarcation between the Peace Prize and the other Nobel Prize. The other Nobel Prize is coming from a committee in Sweden, in Stockholm. And then the Peace Prize coming from a committee in Norway. Again, I don't know the why or history of that. But the entire edifice is fraudulent, right? Alfred Nobel's will is a legal document. And so the most important physics has been completed for the better part of a decade completely. So that would kind of be the biggest development in physics. But Point being is the prize is fraudulent. The motivation and desire to receive a prize is juvenile beyond all anything that could be for anybody. There's nothing inherently wrong if you actually do what you say you're going to do, respect and acknowledge the most important discoveries, but that's never been the case. It's just, again, it's a pizza party for the school council, but they don't really run the school. They're just kind of doing something. But regardless, so then you have this other Venezuelan, Machado, saying, I'm going to present my prize to Donald Trump, not with the approval of the committee. And again, I'm over here sitting like, who cares about a prize? But again, high school never ends. People have the maturity of 14-year-old school kids. And then they have this extreme moral absolutism reaction from both sides and every side. And it's just like, that is not how real decisions are made. That's not how real behavior should be presented, and certainly not from any sort of world leader, and certainly not from anybody in a place of authority, ever. But regardless, we have this prize, and she presents it to Trump. The Nobel Committee's like, oh, this is, insulting to the prize, and it's just like, I'm just scratching my head like one hypocrite's putting out another hypocrite, and they're all competing over bullshit, just stuff that has absolutely no relevance to anything, with the complete unification of physics very literally sitting on the internet. And so that's in addition to Trump's amazing FIFA Peace Prize, which was introduced this year, but it's hilarious because people, seeing again the moral reaction from the quote-unquote Democrat or the liberal left or political ideology, where it's like, the Nobel Prize is the actual prize and this FIFA prize is a fake prize. It's just like they're all just rocks. I mean, it's all just some mostly, I wouldn't say, mostly well-intended, but again, if you're brushing up against anything that's classified, right, obviously you're not going to go get some acknowledged public prize, which the engineering applications that would have won Nobel Prizes in physics, you can just start a huge amount of them. And so, you don't even have to be that involved in anything to know about that. And so it's just like, I don't know what people are doing or what people care about. But the FIFA prize, mocking it as not a real prize, and the Nobel Prize is the real prize, when it's just a big game. And if you think life is this big game, you're not in the mix of anything that matters. And so that's fun and exciting. We talked about Trump flipping off. There was a Ford factory worker, and we said, again, a president, this huge emotional reaction of, a president couldn't flip somebody off. And again, that's a situation where threatening to invade another sovereign nation, or actually invading another sovereign nation, that's an action, right? Actions speak louder than words. And then, legally flipping somebody off is protected, or supposed to be, by the freedom of speech or freedom of expression, contained within freedom of speech. Still an absolutely atrocious legal term phrasing thing. But I guess the factory worker had said he's a pedophile protector, which he is. I can't begin to imagine how there's any sort of you have to vote to release who's a pedophile on Epstein's Island. So that whole situation, we're at such a level of hypocrisy and idiocracy in 1984 and Beavis and Butthead that it's just I don't know, get out your kazoo and bonk each other on their heads with plastic hammers and say, "Whoop, I'm Elmer Fudd, I'm Dumb and Dumber." But again, a president flipping somebody off is not, the actions are what matters. If someone flips somebody off, that is in no way a reportable a thing, and he's still a pedophile protector. So you get a little bit of both. But seriously, all of this is serious. But again, I don't even understand what's happening with the Epstein stuff. How can you redact things? Because typically it's under the diction of the verbiage that, we can't release this document for national security. And now it's just it's like the Chinese government trying to deny Tiananmen Square. It's what is going on here? But yeah, I can't say anything else because I don't know. But so I wanted to read, Trump had a response to Denmark, I believe, or this was to the Norwegian people. But in the White House letterhead, Washington, D.C., 20,500. I guess I don't know if that's a zip code or address. Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars, plus all caps, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect the land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago. But we had boats landing there also. And what is he talking about? Is he talking about established the United States? So I'm not even really sure what he's referencing there. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Some kind of random words capitalized in there. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump. Again, like, I just don't, I can't, again, it's just, at this point, I gotta take this stuff as, like, it's like, funny. Like, I don't care. Because, again, I'm the victim of crime to a level other people aren't. But again, like, having a temper tantrum because he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, which is already fraudulent and worthless. Having stopped 8 wars, which ones? I'm very curious to see where that number came from. But again, I feel no obligation purely of peace, although it will always be predominant. But what is good and proper for the United States? And again, it's just like one of these things where it's like, ho, I could take Greenland. And then everyone's like, whoa, we can't do that seriously. And then he's like, whoa, you think I won't take Greenland? So kind of just like this joke that escalates into a real thing. And honestly, at this point, like I said, because of these actions, I see it as inevitable. And then it's kind of like, the big backlash is like, you're attacking NATO. And again, I don't think it would ever escalate to that. Which shouldn't. I mean, but again, what level of carnival are we at? Who knows? I'm around for it. I got my popcorn. I got some tea right there. I don't know. I just started drinking tea because, I don't know, my brother drinks it and I was like, let's try it out. But regardless, it's just like, again, the overall geopolitical landscape to me is, again, Iran's doing dumb shit through proxies. Russia's doing dumb shit that he still thinks is the USSR. China's not really doing dumb shit. They steal a lot of stuff. And then the United States does dumb shit. It's like that in North Korea is not really in a position to do dumb shit, but they're doing dumb shit internally. And besides that, everybody else is just kind of like, all right, guys, let's kind of move on and like not do world wars anymore. And so that's kind of like Western Europe's response. It's kind of everybody else's response. It's just like, what is this? And again, to what end? Like, what, saying Greenland needs to be protected from Russia and China? And again, establishing trade routes is in no way a political development, right? If you have a company and it's in the Cyrillic alphabet and owned by a Russian, or in the Chinese characters and owned by Chinese, that doesn't necessarily mean, a thing of the government. And people will say, well, the Chinese Communist Party owns a lot of the quote-unquote private business. And it does. But I have a mindset that's outside of 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. What is all this positioning going to do? The politics of it won't matter. And the economics, right? Everyone wants money. That's all that really validates human behavior. So there's no mystery as to what's going on. And people just see this as like China establishing a trade route in Africa or in the Arctic as like, and specifically China has never been expansionist, like ever. And so this idea that China's gonna like start attacking the US mainland or like poses a huge threat to even like Canada or something is just like establishing a trade route versus expansionist government takeover are just so disparate at this point in history. It's not even the same conversation. And so do I see, again, Russia or China coming into Greenland and trying to like start a major war? Absolutely not. Like effectively 0% chance. And so I don't see that as a valid concern whatsoever. Again, establishing trading things is a totally different conversation. Winning this Nobel Peace Prize is hilariously irrelevant. Behaving like an absolute child, no doubt. But even saying it's the best for the United States of America, I just see it as like nobody cares. And then the Europe's response, again, of this like Denmark, right? Greenlanders are saying there's not one colonizer better than the other. And I'm just, like I said, it is what it is, right? Nation state boundaries are pretty much set. They might change a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's just like, this is the rules, here's are the boundaries, let's just make shit make sense. So meaning, if Trump does, and again, it does seem like he's posturing, like I don't see the United States at this point taking Greenland. But I'm just saying here, what Trump has, another 2 years in office. And then at this point, like I said, I don't even see it out of the question that he will try to run for a third term or something. I just don't even know. Again, we're such at a level of Carnival, Idiocracy, 1984, Beavis and Butthead. I just don't know how what the American populace or their jurisprudence people are going to react to. And so it's just like, would he try it? Sure. Is it even realistically possible? I want to say I don't think so, but at this point I have zero confidence in anything called the law. Ooh, this law boogeyman thing's supposed to be real. It isn't. But again, okay, we take Greenland, meaning the United States government, and I just say we because I live here and I want to leave here as soon as possible. And again, 0% political, can't emphasize that enough. But you get Greenland, right? Does Denmark, take up arms and try to defend it? Like, are we shooting each other over Greenland? No, that's just not going to happen. Some posturing, both sides deploy troops, and then we say this, this, and this, and then we buy something. To me, that's most likely what's going to happen. But I see the motivation and action from the Trump White House as absolutely going to take this thing. I can't see getting kinetic, meaning Denmark troops versus U.S. troops shooting it out on Greenland soil. I can't even imagine, again, anything besides these border skirmishes of Russia and Ukraine happening, certain areas of Africa happening, maybe certain areas in Southeast Asia like Burma or Myanmar happening, or still is. There's pretty much a civil war kind of still going on there. But it's just these well-established nation states attacking each other. What is going on? So I do think Trump's going to continue to do stupid shit. I do still think Denmark specifically, but the wider EU and Western Europe just kind of being like, what the fuck is going on? Which is kind of the to me, appropriate response. I don't see it as useful to fight over anything in terms of an actual shootout war. But then again, the United States acquires Greenland. What changes? Does the day-to-day lives of Greenlanders change? No. Does the day-to-day lives of Denmark and the United States change? No. Does Trump get to say he conquered this land and maybe stopped 9 wars? I guess I don't see Trump's motivation, and it's just kind of like what's going on, right? You're at Read and Relax Day on Friday. Everyone's kind of reading their books, and the big bully or the show-off kid in class is raising his voice, and everyone's just like, well, shit. I guess we got to deal with this guy now. And so, but then again, let's assume he doesn't kind of overthrow the term limits. Let's just assume that kind of stays in play. What happens in 2 years? Does it just stay within the United States? Because again, I see it as in these provincial, these oblasts, these different regions owned by different countries as such an irrelevancy, right? If it's technically a territory legally of the United States or Denmark, to me, if I was a Greenlander, it really wouldn't matter. But that's just kind of what I see. This letter is hilarious. I can't believe I'm reading this stupid level shit, man. But the world is not secure. And it's just, I don't know who he's appealing to. Just I guess his own party, I guess. But it's just I don't know. You're watching it, the absolute man-child of the world. And it's just because, again, when people first voted him in, again, non-concurrent, I don't know how many non-concurrent terms from presidents in the United States there have been, but that intermission, when Trump first got elected, a lot of his electorate base was, the anti-politician. And now Trump is morphed into this thing, this politician. He's no longer has the outsider type of appeal, and he's just doing random celebrity type shit. I have no idea. But that's kind of what's going on. That's the big story in development. But truly I see as Greenland becoming a part of the United States legally inevitable. For whatever reason, who really knows? But in terms of Russia and China, establishing the Arctic in terms of political expansion, 0.00%. I will say 0%. 0. But that's what's going on. And so we read the letter, we talked about that, but then we have these tariffs, okay? And so a little bit on the economics. Again, there's not enough economic discussion to even comment on. But you'll see this thing, Trump comes out, the Supreme Court was supposed to rule on the legality of the tariffs, which I can't take the Supreme Court or any court ruling as any sort of legitimacy whatsoever. But Trump says the tariffs will help, again, bring business to within the United States borders. There was just a study I seen on Reddit coming, I think it was out of Germany, but saying that the United States taxpayer is paying the tariffs. And to me, both sides of that economic discussion are just not applicable. right? To me, when I see this tariffs, I see it as kind of a test of the consumer's demand elasticity, if you want to say that. I'm buying something, I'm buying 1 unit, it costs me $10. Trump says, okay, I'm going to make that, when you ship it in here, you have to pay another $2. We'll just say another $10, 100% tariff, right? Because you're getting the tariffs that went to India, 25, 50%, tariffs that went to, it was another country, but it was like 50 to 100%, like, I mean, substantial large tariffs. And so now I'm the president and I say you have to pay, it was $10, now it's $20. So again, the consumer still said, the manufacturer, the seller has to say, okay, does it make sense to sell into this market? And then frankly, if the demand is there and the profit margin is still good enough, the sale will always go through, right? It costs me, the buyer is willing to pay $10, and the buyer is still there at $20. I might still only be making $1 a unit as opposed to $2 a unit, but I'm still making enough. And so there would be a limit where, from the seller's point of view, if the margin was so small not to make the sale, but it is, $20 is $20. So if they can make the sale, they're going to make the sale. And so the biggest limiting factor of that is the buyer's demand, right? For the buyer, if the price is now, because the manufacturers haven't lowered their price. They're either just selling less volume or the price is being raised to the consumer. But again, it's not like you're not forcing the buyer to buy that thing. And so you're just kind of testing, like, not intentionally, but the tariffs, to me, the direct immediate impact is a short-term test on buyer elasticity. Does the consumer still have enough money and still want the object enough to pay for it? And so, because if there's no demand, there's no motivation for a seller to import an object into the United States. And so then there's no sale and no tariff revenue, and the buyer doesn't get their good. And so to me, it's mainly a short demand elasticity from the consumer, and then as long as you're not hitting the absolute floor of profitability for the producer, it doesn't really matter. And so I would say there's a heavier burden on the consumer, but again, it's not like you put the tariff on there and then you have to buy something. And so that's kind of the economic development that I see. And again, that's for short term. And then for how long is short term within an economic development? 1 year, 6 months, 18 months, 3 years, 50 years? What is exactly short, medium, and long term from an economic standpoint? And so Trump is going to impose 10% tariffs on EU countries not supporting the acquisition. And so in Greenland, there's already no restriction on leases, bases, and so they already have this military presence, and it's just they're not satisfied until they legally own it, which again just makes no sense, but right? The vast majority of all human behavior that I've ever encountered makes absolutely, literally zero sense. So that's going on. But the economic impact of tariffs, to me, is just nobody's discussing things that can definitively be assessed as right or wrong. And so, because then again, then you have to consider, again, market, right? Like, what is Trump says America's the greatest, the American citizens say we're the greatest, but it's like, if I'm an Indian manufacturer and I want to ship something, right, then you just look to a different market, I guess. And so then demand isn't just in the United States. It's like if you can sell that good to a different country, maybe before there was tariffs, you could have the maximum profit. You'd make $10 a unit in the United States, but now that the tariffs go up and you'd only make $2 a unit in the United States, but now you'd make $4.50 in Pakistan or something. I don't know, just making up countries. And so it's like, then there's this consideration of sequestered markets, right? The United States market is less sequestered than the Chinese market because of policy. And so you have demand that's always emergent from human behavior that directly influences policy, but not a lot, right? There's a lot of people want things that the government say no. Look at the Controlled Substance Act right here in the United States. And so if the consumer, again, has pressure from these tariffs where there's just not enough like I said, testing that demand, well, there's demand in other markets. And so then you have that consideration and how much does that ebb and flow, and there's just so much going into this, where it's not so long story, but conclusion, nobody really knows. And overall, just whenever I see economic discussion, it's just like so rudimentary that it's not applicable. But point being is it's undecided as what the tariffs are doing, over what time frame they're doing it. And you can look at history and stuff, but again, it's just, when you do look at historical markets over the past, it just doesn't give me insight. The technological development that's occurred in the past since the internet and then whatever, 93, 94 is just so huge. It's just like, so both Trump saying the tariffs are helping the American people and the other response of it's definitively hurting the American consumer, none of that's true. And what the actual consequences are, it could range from detrimental, pretty neutral to inconsequential. I don't really see it as being super consequential. But again, the money problem is solvable from every aspect because it's an emergent system. We invented money to represent value. You create more value than dollar bills, well, it's an afterthought. And so that is where we are with the tariffs. And then so finally, we have the ICE agent. An ICE agent shot a man in the leg after a shovel attack. So we had this Renee Good. We reviewed that, talked about that case. But then again, we see this escalation of tension, quote unquote, at the homeland, in the United States by federal agents. And the mayor of Minneapolis comes out all hot and bothered. Tim Walz, the governor, comes out all hot and bothered. They tone back a little bit. Kristi Noem and Hegseth and Trump are like, they've readied 1,500 troops to deploy to Minneapolis. Noem's used the word to have the local police stand down. So again, you get this posturing from both sides where it's like, what's going on here? Where you're supposed to have clear-cut jurisdiction or at least cohesion amongst law enforcement because the laws are still the laws. And that's kind of got to make sense at some point. But again, we have people in positions of power and authority without the maturity to actually direct human behavior. And so you get posturing from both sides. We know Kristi Noem, Hegseth, Trump, we're going to assert the authority of the federal government. And they're still doing it under not the guise, but the assertion and motivation of the law. And so they see the Minneapolis people as, again, potentially invoking the Insurrection Act. And so we've covered, again, legally and historically, Trump did not incite the January 6th insurrection whatsoever. People have to take responsibility on their own, take responsibility for their own actions. Trump pardoning those people was barnacle, stupid, insane. But overall, the thing you have to understand is there's no consistency. Laws that are not enforced are not laws, and the laws that are enforced are not enforced consistently, so it's a crapshoot. We have no idea if you can live a life in this country. Me particularly, I can't. But so you have another shooting, somebody attacking them with a shovel. Again, a shovel at close range, I would have lethal force. It's plenty fine. But again, I just don't see what these protesters think they're accomplished. Because now we've gotten big protests out of Minneapolis. Again, Minneapolis does have, I think, this is the highest Somali population. But I'm in Columbus, Ohio, which I believe is the second. But regardless, it doesn't matter, Somalis or people from Denmark or people from Thailand or people from France. Okay, I take that back. We got to keep France out of here. But regardless, there's huge migrant populations everywhere. Again, the immigration thing without crime, I've already covered that a bunch. But it was the agents were chasing a Venezuelan national. A car crash, a fight ensued, and he kind of gets shot. I think it's non-life-threatening stuff. But to me, that shooting was fine. But again, it's just the posturing, both from the federal, Noem, Hegseth, Trump, and then the pushback walls and the mayor of Minneapolis. And it's just, again, now we're at the part where we're at the bar and people are all flustered and we're all banging our chests. And it's like, what? Okay, guys, what are we going to accomplish here? Is Minneapolis going to succeed from the United States of America? Are the people of Minnesota going to rise up against the United States federal government? Okay, if they tried, it would be impossible. That would be squashed in 2 seconds. Right? Is the federal government really going to want to come in Tiananmen Square, Minnesotans? It's like, I don't know, cell phones are right here watching. It's just like, what are we doing? Like, what point are we getting to? And so, but again, it's this moral absolutism when people get offended and they think like they're doing something good because they're coming forth with all of their emotion, right? You see pictures of protesters open carrying in the streets, which you should be able to do. But is that going to cause some eyeballs? For some people it will. For me it wouldn't. For a lot of people it wouldn't. But it's just in the context in which it's done, it's like this posturing. And so it's just, again, I don't see what either side is attempting or trying to accomplish, but besides saying we're doing the right thing or we have the authority or this is the law. And it's just a bunch of hypocrites, and there's no clear end goal to any of this. But in relation to the first shooting, feds say that Agent Jonathan Ross sustained injuries causing internal bleeding. And that was from the Renee Nicole Good shooting. Again, we've all seen the car pull away, the shots fired. There's no way that caused severe. I mean, unless no. But then again, the federal government or whoever made that statement refuses to expand on that. Because an internal bleed, a bruise is internal bleeding. You going in hemorrhaging and dying in 2 seconds, internal bleeding. So what's the severity? Because then again, you get these things where somebody will get slightly offended and then they'll say the most emotional, exaggerated thing based off that small kernel of truth they can. Again, both sides are doing this. I can't believe I'm sitting here. I read this shit in like 3rd grade and thinking there's no way people actually like behave like this. And then sure enough, you get older and like, yep, that's exactly what everyone's doing. And so just again, trying to highlight from both sides. There's our fundamental dichotomy of two, but just nobody knows how to behave. There are no values, there are no morals, and most importantly, there are no laws. Laws that are not enforced are not laws. And when your governors, your statesmen, your presidents, all of these people don't have values, you're never going to get consistency of action. And that's what we're watching. And so we'll see how it plays out. Again, I see with what Trump's doing and the federal government's doing and the overall sentiment of immaturity of human beings, that the acquisition of Denmark is inevitable. I definitely see that happening. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching. My rights continue to be violated, and I'm seeking asylum in any country that will allow me to eat, sleep, and do work comfortably and regularly. That's it. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.